Today I made a working lights out puzzle with just redstone. For those who aren't familiar with lights out, let me explain, it's really simple. The whole idea is that you have a board of cells that can be either on or off, and when you click on the cell, it inverts its state and the state of the 4 directly adjacent cells to it as well. You usually start with a random pattern of on and off cells like this one I just created, and your goal is to turn all of them off by clicking one cell at a time. and that's literally it. So for example, I'm gonna solve this lights out puzzle by firstly clicking here. It's gonna invert the state of those 5 cells and then clicking over there. And as you can see, our puzzle is now solved. So this puzzle didn't require that much thought, but I must admit, some of these puzzles are insanely hard and are on boards that are way bigger. One interesting thing about lights out is that not all starting patterns are solvable. For example, this pattern with 4 dots at the extremities on this 4x4 board isn't solvable. Really, no matter how hard you try, for how long you try, or like how many combinations you try, you're never going to end up solving it. However, Lights Out is a game that is reversible, meaning that a certain combination of moves can be reverted by doing these moves in reverse. For example, if I click on this cell, then this one, we get this certain pattern of cells. But now, if I click the cells in reverse, so this one was the one I clicked last, and this one was the one I clicked first, you can see that we come back to a solved state. And by the way, this property isn't always true for other games. Thus, I think one of the best ways to generate puzzles for your friends to try out is to click a few times on an all-off board, as any pattern generated by you clicking on the board from an all-off state always has a solution to come back to this all-off state. Because we saw that a sequence of moves is always reversible. The solution will thus be the moves you've done to create the puzzle but in reverse. For example, I know that this puzzle is solvable because I just created it by hand. I used this redstone lights out board throughout the whole video until this point. But how does it work? First, we need to remember the rules, or the rule in this case, which is that when we click a cell, we need to invert its state and the state of the 4 directly adjacent cells around it. So to begin with, we need a way to store a cell state. Our cell can be either on or off, true or false, 1 or 0, you name it. And the only thing that we need to be able to do on this state is inverting it, meaning if it's 1, it goes to 0, and if it's 0, it goes back to 1. And that is very easily done with a T flip-flop. The state of a T flip-flop can either be on or off, and is represented by this redstone lamp over there. And if I click the invert button over here, you can see that it inverts its state. It was at 1, now it is at 0. So right now I'm sending a 10-tick pulse into the T flip-flop to invert its state with this stone button over there, but actually a 2-tick pulse is enough as well. As you can see, it inverts its state successfully. It's gonna be useful later, I promise. We can now add a green circuit which is going to be responsible for inverting the T flip-flop of the cell like so. And at the very top we can see the input pressure plate, which with the help of this observer and this 2-tick repeater is gonna send a 2-tick pulse into the T flip-flop down there. Because when we click a cell, we want this cell to switch state. So right now it's currently on, but if I press on the cell, it's now off. So we can now change the state of our cell, but we still need to change the state of the 4 adjacent cells as well. First, we're going to start doing that by building a blue line which is going to get activated every time we click the cell. And it will send a signal outwards to the 4 adjacent cells, basically telling them to invert their state as well. As a reminder, this cell is going to be surrounded with all the cells directly next to each other. So you have to imagine that there are exact replicas of this cell around it. Like for example, this cell is going to be here, 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 and here as well. Next, we build the light blue lines, which are the receivers. These light blue lines receives any signal that the blue line in any of the 4 adjacent cells is sending. As you can see, this light blue receiving line is actually directly opposite to this blue sending line. To illustrate it a bit more easily, we can stack this cell, and as you can see, this blue sender here is directly aiming into the receiver of this cell. So when this blue sender is going to send a signal, this signal is actually going to be received by the receivers of the 4 adjacent cells. Then this signal is actually going to go down their green inverting line, and then at the end invert their T flip-flops. So for example, if I click on this cell, you're gonna see that the T flip-flop of this adjacent cell is actually going to invert. Boop. And that's how we invert the state of the 4 adjacent cells. Lastly, let's add this white circuit which lights up these top lamps that are directly being fed by the cell's T flip-flop. It's only there so that the player can actually see how the board looks like instead of having to go down in a yellow circuit and see which state the T flip-flop is in. Then add some decoration, a wind detection and a reset mechanism, and here you go, you got a working lights out cell. Only need to stack it in the X and Z directions, connect the reset lines at the front and the wind detection lines at the back, and you have a working board. Anyway, I thought it was pretty cool, so I wanted to show you. See ya.